Okay, Tommaso, sorry. Yes.
Okay, it seems that it started to record.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining this second seminar of the year on the battery industry in China. This is part, no, sorry, we are not recording. Sorry, apologies.
It appears that it's recording.
Is recording, yes.
It says to me that the registration is paused.
Not to me. Perhaps yours registered because perhaps you were recording before and then to me it's fine, it's recording.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining. Let's start again. We will cut this. So this seminar on the battery industry in China is part of JERPISA's ongoing interest on the electrification process in the automotive industry, and part of our study on the broader battery value chain the process of mineral extraction in the industry. This specific seminar that we'll have today started already with a conversation that we had on the industry in China at the last JERPISA International Colloquium in June that had a great success, and we promised a follow-up given the interest and all the open questions we were left with. So today we have two presentations, one given by Xieshu, Wang and ZHAO Wei on specialized vertical integration, so the value chain strategy of power lithium-ion battery firms in China. The second one given by Stéphane Heim, that is part of a team work Stéphane will present on behalf of his colleagues too, on competition patterns and dynamics of the Chinese lithium-ion battery industry. So these two presentations give us two different perspectives on the emerging role that China is playing, not only discussing government, local and national government policies in China, so the role of policy frameworks in determining the success of this industry for China, but also they will give us a closer look at corporate strategies that have channeled this success. So you will see the first presentation will focus more on this idea of specialized vertical integration. The second presentation will include a focus on competition patterns, on the role of suppliers also in the overall development of the industry, and so on and so forth. We will have two presentations of about 20-25 minutes. Then we will have just a 5 minutes break. And we will continue. We will have Professor Bruno Jetan from the University of Brunei Dar es Salaam that will discuss the two presentations through a contribution of about 10 minutes. And then we will have open debate. So we hope you will enjoy the session. Of course, we will also share, we are recording, as you can see, so we will also share the video afterwards and the presentations if the speakers agree. You can follow the other appointments on the topic through our website and our social media. As we hope you have done already. I'll leave it to the speakers now, and I will come back in the debate. Thank you very much. I guess we start with ZHAO, your presentations first, and then Stéphane. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lorenza. Xieshu, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Would you like to start? And I can share my screen. So tell me when I
Okay.
turn on the slide.
I thought it's our colleague and especially Japanese colleagues who need to start first. But if it's our turn, it's okay.
Okay. So I'll share my screen.
Yeah, I hope my Emma will collaborate.
Yeah, but it will be no problem. That's
Yeah.
So can you see that? Can you see that?
Okay.
Very good.
Perfect. So yeah, I will be brief because we don't have much time. And it's a co-paper. I have been working with ZHAO and also another author which cannot participate today. So our general idea is to look into the industry of lithium battery in China, which has now become, I think, everybody thinks that it's one of the dominant industry in the world because there are so many actors and there are so many also leading producers now, not only in China, but also selling out of China. So our big question to start with is that why this phenomenon has only taken place in China so far. A general idea is looking at first the policy because the government has been providing a lot of guidance and also financial support as well as technical requirements in order to lead the growth of the NEV. Anyway, means new energy vehicle, which is a term quite specific used in China. Not for EV and also for fuel cell electric vehicle. So we had in the paper, we had a general look at which are the policies that has been put into place, not only subsidy, but also there are other advantages. For example, easy to get the plate, especially in big city like Beijing and Shanghai, parking and driving facilities offering for EV owners. Other very important and key aspects is actually the technical requirements that Chinese institutions have been put into place and also modifying along the time in order to better encourage the innovation and also technology catch up with the leaders in Japan and in South Korea. And gradually, the initial, actually in 2016, there was also legislation which was put into place in order to help protect the local producers, Chinese ones, against the foreign competitors in the Chinese market. So, for example, electric cars with foreign batteries produced out of China cannot get the subsidy. So this gave actually a window time for Chinese lithium battery firms to catch up. So this is the policy aspect. And on the other hand, which is more fundamental as we think, is that actually China is one of the biggest EV market in the world, due to its population, due to also its policy to electrification. So it presents about half of the world stock and sales annually. Actually, this phenomenon is changing maybe also because Europe has published its green plan, Green Deal. So it's catching up very quickly. We will look at maybe in the conclusion. Our paper actually is more focused on the micro level because our idea is that to win this, to have this impressive growth of the industry is not only the policy side and the market side, but also very important, the application, the engagement of the industrial actors. So there are different strategies that a company can use in order to compete One is the cost leadership to increase the capacity to reduce costs through expansions in China and also out of China, as we have seen in the case of CATL and also BYD and other companies like Gotion. A second one is product differentiation, especially in the case of lithium battery. We have seen recently that a lot of leading companies have been working on the innovation of the pack technology or cell technology in order to reduce the problem of safety that we have seen in China, in order to increase in density and also reach cost reduction. This is a case of the battery CTP of CATL and also of the we call the blade battery of BYD. A third point we mentioned is that this very close cooperation, and even we can say it's a lockup between OEMs, tier ones, and with battery firms. Especially now, if we know that in China we are facing a problem of lack of supply of battery due to the very strong demand this year, and also of the rising price of the materials. So their relationship is very key in the development of the industry. So our idea is that looking at the strategic moves, which is the fourth aspect, especially upward or forward or backward along the supply chain, value chain actually, in order to understand why there have been such a fast growth of this industry. So this we can go through very quickly. It's a very general look at about the EV industry, because EV industry has been actually a fundamental support for the battery growth, of course. In the case of China, it has been become one of the global leading producing countries. More than in 2019, we see that more than 73% of the global capacity was located in China. In the case of China also, we have some differences compared to Korea and the Japanese batteries, because Chinese one, regarding the form, they are mainly prismatic of the cell form, and now they are using more ternary materials, but we have seen actually recently a backing of the LFP batteries, which is safer and actually more cost competitive. So if you look at the graphs, we can see that the battery cells have been really growing very fast for the last few years. And this continues to be the case because a lot of leading companies are planning a lot capacity growth in China and also abroad. Because this growth is so impressive and there are a lot of competitors in the market, actually, we have already observed industrial consolidation underway since 2005 and 2016. The number have been reduced significantly now to 50 producers last year. And the concentration is very obvious. If we look at the top 10 in the market, it's almost over 90% of the total market share. So we see that the leading companies are making their efforts to consolidate the market, and the market is becoming mature and the competition is just more fierce. This page is describe our theory or concept of this specialized vertical integration. We know that specialization, they have different ways of specialization. For example, resource-based through mass production. So capacity expansion, which is the case of a lot of battery producers. In order to reduce costs and also to chase out their competitors. The second one is a capability-based specialization. As we saw that we said earlier that companies are making a lot of technology innovation in order to be more competitive and to supply the market with better products. So this is the specialization, which is general strategies of company. In our case, our theory is that this specialization is a fundamental for our lithium firms in China. And these firms have chosen to focus, so to stay in their specialization when they do the vertical integration. What does it mean? It means that when they invest upstream, downstream to grow, for example, in the raw materials in order to secure the supply, or if they go into the downstream, for example, battery recycle or reuse, they do not leave the sector of battery. For example, very rarely they go into the EV production, except for BYD, which is really a conglomerate, a giant, which want to cover all the sectors of energy, actually. So that's why we call it a specialized vertical integration. This is approach that Chinese companies have been chosen. We also see some cases of foreign companies actually invest upstream, downstream. For example, LG Chem has also invested in mining company in order to secure its supply. We also see that Tesla announced that it will annually use a lot of money to invest in mining and also battery material production. So they are also going vertical integration. But this phenomenon is mostly impressive in China because of the size of the market, the number of the actors, and also the impact on the value chain, global value chain. So this table actually will show you some examples. It's not exhaustive. So it's some examples of major players from different segments of the value chain of lithium battery. To read this table, you have to first look at the left column. We have 6 categories of firms. Means that we classify our players according to their origin. So for example, in the case of BYD, we argue that BYD is also a vehicle producer because it's very important in EV production. But as BYD, starting from battery production business in 1995, I guess, later it bought an auto company and go into the EV production in 2002. So in this case, we keep BYD in the incumbent battery manufacturer in order to see better the picture of its development. So actually, if you look at the blue, so the lines, you will see different sectors from raw material mining, refining, battery material production, and going into downstream for the cell module pack, BMS manufacturing, and going into the EV production, and then battery cycle reuse, and also energy storage use for second life, for the battery second life. It's to read the table, if you look at the yellow one means the origin of the companies. And then you go horizontally and to see this company to which segments have it developed in order to have this vertical integration. So yeah, I think Joey, maybe you can take the floor.
Well, okay, thank you very much.
So,
take over and quickly to just say what you say. If we don't put time in this table, but if you check the history, the timing of these events, you can see that firstly, the value chain creation, the whole battery value chain creation was done mainly first of all, by the battery makers. The battery makers here we mean that the makers of the cells, of the modules, are assembling the modules into packs, and also the BMS manufacturers. So this is what we call the battery makers. So this was the first wave, and then you have among these battery makers, you have exceptional case, as Xieshu just said, the BYD one, which is from the beginning, it was a very early stage of their development. It adopted vertical integration as a strategy. So they entered as a first mover in the EV assembly business, a car maker. So it was the biggest EV maker in China. And then you have many other, with the development of the EV markets, you have many other battery producers from the raw materials, the cell components, and other battery makers in China. They participate into this value chain creation and entering into different segments of the value chain. And then you have almost at the same time, when the traditional automakers, they found that, wow, there is a emerging value chain, emerging industry, which is the battery. They began to try to enter into these segments. So more and more that you find that they set up joint ventures or even acquired some small parts of the battery manufacturing, the cells, but not the cells. For the moment, it is still the pack manufacturing and BMS. Some of the firms would like to enter. A typical one is the BMW, the Volkswagen. Sorry, they would like to enter into this. And then you have other startups, new players, the digital firm companies, and they would like to also enter into this new industry. And they are facing the choice of which point. It's an entry point of the different segments of the value chain. So basically, we can summarize quickly that you have the traditional battery makers. There's this strategy of vertical integration is based on their logic of core competence exploitation. So they are using their traditional core competence, etc. But for the EV assemblers, so for the OEMs, they are in fact core competence exploring. They are searching for new core competence because they are facing a disruptive transformation of the whole traditional value chain, and you have the emergence of the new supply chain, and even the new battery value chain. So the battery value chain, if we like, we can very quickly see that you have the supply side, manufacturing a supply chain, which is before that the pack arrives at EV. And then you have the application and the usage, charging station, and the recycling, etc., which we can call that application, utilization, and the installation chain. So the whole structure of the traditional automobile industry is really disrupted by this emergence and interception of the battery value chain. And we can say also that for now, in China, what we are observing is the emergence of a relatively complete value chain, which are there formed up jointly created by all these different categories of players and actors at the firm level. And thanks to their all of their verticalization or vertical integration strategy. And so the value chain is becoming an from my point of view, is another industry. Is an industry which can be said an independent sector by its own, because their application, of course, the main application is in the EV, but they also have other implications and installations like storage, like lighting, like in many other mobile utilities. So here is our conclusion very quickly. The vertical integration strategy is not unique to China. Many firms in the world, they also search for such kind of integration, especially in face of the development of a new industry with some emerging technologies, and the dominant design has not yet been formed up. The possession and acquisition of key natural resources, government policy, and all the huge market demand. Maybe these are the strong factors, external factors, which made this industry or this value chain the most robust right now in China. So Chinese firms, Chinese companies, they of course benefit from this situation, and they are opportunities catching orientation, and they're under less pressure of short-term returns of their shareholders. Many companies, they just want to grow up and expand their capacity of production, and they attracted a lot of financial investments. And so China, by such a way of the combination of the external factors and internal action and strategies of firms, now become has gained a leading position in the lithium-ion battery production. And in the future, I think that if we go further to see that the interesting phenomena is really between the battery manufacturing activities and the relationship with the EV assembly. So there you have an interface which is very dynamic, is not yet very well defined, but in the future, it is to the future. For a long time, I think that will be a very complex situation, mixed up of cooperation and competition, because you do not only have the battery makers who adopt this vertical integration strategy, but also the car makers. And besides the industrial factors, faster moves, government's financial support, technical change, industrial coordination are also very important at this stage of the development. So what will happen in the future, let's keep a close eye on it. Okay, that's what we found, and also as conclusion. Thank you very much.
I just want to, sorry, because of the interruption of the baby. I just want to add for the table, actually, if you look, we have we have put into the evidence, actually the lithium battery makers, they are doing the most investment, so vertical integration, because if we see other companies, they maybe go to 1, 2, or 3 segments, but actually, if you look at the part of the battery manufacturer, they are really going into different segments of this value chain, which means that they are making efforts to using their specialization of battery making as a kind of a basis. This is what I and Joey think, to cover the whole value chain. But as we said earlier, that with the competition going further, and also with the difficult market situation, for example, the rising costs, and also foreign competitors that is growing up in Europe because of the policy support and also industry consciousness, so that probably in the future, battery companies in China still have to choose some key segments in order to concentrate their efforts. That's all. Thank you, Jiawei, and thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you. So we now move to, Stéphane, please. You can share your screen.
Yes, hello everyone. Hope you're doing well, wherever you are. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
It's fine, Lorenza? Okay, thank you very much. So hello, everyone. I'm Stéphane Heim. I'm associate professor at Kyoto University. Basically, I'm French. I'm not Chinese neither, so I don't know what I'm doing right here in this discussion. This is a paper we've conducted research with my colleagues. Here you can see Kosuke Kakitani, who works at Toyota Motor Corporation in Tianjin in China right now. ZHAO Li, who is professor at Hiroshima University, City University, and Hiromi Shoji, who is the dean of Kagoshima Prefectural College. We started this research 2 years ago. Thanks to ZHAO, we could visit also a cluster in Guangzhou 2 years ago, just before the COVID. And then now we have more review about what is the current structure of this infant industry. So basically, we started our research where we ended last June's colloquium. For those who didn't join this colloquium, we had a session and many different questions. And one question that we were most interested in was, is there a dominant strategy or different trajectories followed mostly by the core supply, the core battery manufacturers, CATL, BYD, Gotion, Lishan, and the others. And that seems very important for us. We think, just like ZHAO pointed out, only the industrial policies and incentives, those are important factors, but we need to look also within the supply chain, what is happening in the supply chain, which is still very young. So the second point we think we have to look at is new entrants such as Foxconn, who is who assembles Apple's iPhones, and is a Taiwanese firm, but now is investing a lot in this EV industry. Then the second point is car makers' investment and integration processes. Well, since 2020, now we've seen Ford, GM, mostly Ford, GM, and Volkswagen investing a lot, also having joint ventures with some battery makers like Gotion in China for Volkswagen. Besides that, we also have the big three German maker, Daimler, BMW, and Audi also. They are very interested in all those developments. But our point today, we would like to, let's say, dig a bit strongly into this value chain in China, and then to look at it. Well, we start from an automotive point of view, but now we enter in the battery chemistry field. So we need to search whether there are different trajectories in this following the battery chemistries, and whether there are different segmentations that are under process into this industry. So basically here you have some figures, the latest figures about the NEV, the new electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, pure electric vehicles, and more recently also hybrid vehicles have been integrated into those counts in China from 2018 till till September. As you can see, of course, during the first until September, we've seen a graph of sales in China of NEV, of electric cars. Well, this is mainly driven by two main models. As you can see, we ranked here 11 car models, and we try to see the different batteries they have, the energy density, the capacity, the cruise range, the prices, and also the battery suppliers. Not only the battery suppliers, but also the cathode, anode, the electrolyte, and the BMS, all those things. We try to look into that to see what's exactly the industry. So the first, the best-selling car car is the Wuling Mini EV, which is an A segment, a very low-cost car. It starts from $4,500 US. It has a limited range, 120 kilometers. Also the energy density is relatively low, battery capacity also, and the battery chemistry is a LFP. For those who are not well knowledgeable about that, it means lithium. Well, I will explain that later on more precisely. And you can see also all the battery suppliers that are involved into this development. For the cells, we have different, we have Gotion, CATL, Filion, Calb, Great Power, Louis-Pur for the cells, and for the BMS and the assembly, Sinoev somewhat. Well, it's a pretty complicated picture. On a similar range, we have at the bottom of this table, you have the Chery EQ1. It will start to be sold in India also really soon. It's also A segment, a very mini car. Well, sales are relatively low right now. The price is also a bit higher than the Mini EV, but well, it's pretty competitive. And it has a better cruising range. And you can see also the battery chemistry, you have NMCs and LFPs. Well, Chery is assembling that, of course, but the main battery manufacturer is CATL. We have another one, Dow Fluoride, and also for LFP cell, for the LFP cell, Beijing National Battery Technology. So also you can see that car makers choose, or they pick up in different battery makers in order to following the chemistries. And well, of course, the second best car is Tesla Model 3. You've all heard in the mid-2020 when they announced that they will launch it with the LFP, because LFP, well, it's not for the cruising range, it's not very good, but usually it's for the entry segment. So in July or in August 2020, when they announced they will shift the battery chemistry to LFP, it made a lot of noise, especially following, well, that's not so important. But anyway, what you can see is that even if they have an LFP chemistry, they have quite a good cruising range, and energy density is pretty high, which is, well, it's quite similar to the NMC. Somewhat, and of course they split it. For the NCA, they still follow LG Chem and somewhat Panasonic, but for the LFP systems, CATL and BYD also. BYD recently announced that they will also supply some batteries, some amounts of batteries to Tesla. So basically here you have a whole picture, but most important is to point out also that it's still a very young industry. Of course, well, when we see that from Western Europe, from North America, from wherever you are, well, everything is now happening in China. Here you have the major battery makers in China. Of course, there is a huge concentration, as it was pointed out already. Of course, the 3, 4, 5 CATL, BYD, Calb, Gotion, and somewhat Svolt will play a huge role in the future. Well, you see that they concentrate a lot of the production. Now, CATL, as you can see, this is until October. They have 54.5 gigawatt per hour of production capacities. Well, when we hear that, we don't know exactly what it means, frankly. What does it mean? If you take a Tesla Model 3 with a 55 kilowatt per hour capacity, the battery as a model, and if you say you will supply them, it means that if CATL supplies all its batteries for this model, it means they can build roughly 1 million cars with that energy, which means BYD, it's roughly 300,000 cars, Calb 115,000, and Gotion less than 100,000, and Svolt 36,000 cars to be supplied. So you see that the spec is still very low, and there are still very room of development when we regard the capacities in places and what can be made in the future. A second point here I want to highlight is, it was already told, there is a move toward now more and more LFP batteries. Here is a graph showing what happened more recently, more than NCM. LFP basically was a good battery until 2016, and in 2016, most of the battery makers shifted to this NCM for many reasons. But now there is a move of reintegrating LFP, so it's a new old technology that is now entering again into the market as the main player. Well, so let's go a bit further into those battery chemistries. Well, the past chemistries, LCO, LMO, the established chemistries, NCA, NMC, LFP, mostly NCA and NMCs now, but you've seen China, LFP has developed a lot, and the competing chemistry, the solid state and the sodium ion batteries, yeah? So here, basically, you have the energy density, the life cycles to see, to compare the battery with each other. Basically, the LFP basic, the most important point perhaps is safety, high power, lower costs. Those are the 3 points that we can expect from those batteries and the developments in the future. On the contrary, NMC and CA batteries, they are, especially when they are nickel rich, because now there is a move to have carbon-free batteries. So you need to have more nickel in those batteries, and especially in the cathode. So you have, and then the costs are very expensive from that point of view if you want to have more nickel-rich batteries. Basically, the markets, NCA and MC are for the mainstream or mid-high-end EVs, while the LFP were firstly developed mostly for the storage energies, but buses, BYD was very advanced in the LFP development for buses. Or light commercial vehicles, and now also for low entry cars. But as you've seen, Tesla Model 3 and the Model Y also now have those batteries, so we can expect having those batteries also in mainstream car models. As for the battery makers, you have here some details, but I will not spend too much time here because I'm already running out of time. Well, we try to see what is now happening in this industry, starting with those materials, basically. So here you have one part of the industry, which is raw material mining and refining. We've inquired into 11 firms and a bit more. From that, you move on, you have one cathode and one anode part, and an electrolyte and a separator. Those are the 4 main elements in a battery, a LIB battery, and a BMS, of course. Then with that, you can assemble that into battery cells, and usually then battery cells into modules, and modules into pack, and then the final battery. Okay, that's the logic as it goes on now. Well, basically on this side here you have different materials. From these materials you have specific electric chemistries processes in order to have stable, or the ionization is very important in the batteries. So you have different ways of organizing those things. And you can see that now there is one particular thing for the cathode. You have, whether you use lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide, you can also hydroxide the lithium from the carbonate or goes through from the spodumene. And then you have NMC precursors. We can talk during the discussion about all those things, a bit technical, but those are quite important materials in order to secure the battery, the batteries, and to have higher ranges. and better density, especially for and this way of organizing the battery goes to the NCA and NCM battery. Okay, basically the LFP follows another value chain, let's say, from lithium iron phosphate. Now titanium dioxide makers are trying to enter the market a lot. And then you have lithium iron phosphate for the LFP, which is quite important. Of course, when you look at this point, we've all heard about cobalt. More than 70% of cobalt come from the Republic of Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, so many problems. But the cobalt is very important because it helps to, let's say, stabilize the battery or the chemistry. So to replace it, it's quite difficult. But anyway, you have that, then the nickel, and the lithium. Lithium, basically South America, Chile, Argentina are the most things from brines. But in Australia, you have lithium and hard rock. And then from that, you have another way of developing this lithium. So basically, you have two different international procurements. For instance, CATL recently, over the past 1-2 years, have been more than agreed for long-term supplies, or even acquired some mining firms, mostly in South America, 4 or 5 mining firms, I guess, if I remember well. The other point is the anode part. So the anode part comes mostly from spherical graphite or silicon. The spherical graphite now is for more than 70% of the production. But if you want to have better LFPs, especially, you need to move on to silicon, and the silicon processes are still not stabilized right now. So this is perhaps in the 1 or 2 years, you will see several moves into this specific segment. Another point is then, if you want to move on to the solid state electrolyte, the solid state batteries, it's mostly electrolyte, and separators are solid. You need pure lithium metal to define that. So here also, if the next generations, or we have many announcements. Well, which one? Well, no, I don't have that in mind, but many announcements about solid state batteries, EVs in the roads in 2025, in 2027, and so on. But still, this segment is still not organized well, and still needs to be inquired to see whether it can be cost efficient or not. And for the sodium batteries, we'll talk about that later on. Yes, and the main evolution, so that we still have time for the discussion in the supply chain. Well, of course, we agree with this vertical integration by core lithium battery makers. BYD, CATL, Farasis, Gotham, the big players, especially CATL now, is trying to reorganize reorganize, but at least to be more cost efficient through joint ventures with mining firms, especially CATL, stakes acquisitions, and long-term supply contracts, which means it's not in the hands of the final OEMs or the final car makers, but these battery makers now try also to have a direct sourcing of the materials. As you've known, until 2018, the lithium prices have just been very, let's say, increased a lot until 2018, and since the beginning of this year have been a rapid increase of the prices. So which means that many cathode makers, those cathode makers are mostly small and medium-sized enterprises. Yes, they have not the size of CATL. They can negotiate the price of these raw materials. So you have two ways of, let's say, handling this problem for the battery makers. On the one hand, you put that on the shoulders of the final consumer. BYD just announced last month that it will raise by 20% its batteries. That is one way of handling with the problem. The second one is, well, it's you have to recontract with the cathode maker so that or renegotiate the prices of materials with them. So the long-term contracts works for the CATL, for the let's call them the first-tier suppliers, but not for the cathode makers and neither for the anode makers. A second very important move we've seen recently comes from the upstream segment, especially the mining firms. There are several mining firms in China that are now deploying new leap strategies, downstream specialization of battery production. The traditional core players, the two main core players are Ganfeng and Tianqi. I haven't talked specified yet Tianqi. Huayou was mostly specialized in the cobalt supply, but those makers now, especially Ganfeng, tries now to develop, especially LFP, not LFP, I'm sorry, to develop new batteries. And I think it's roughly 70% of the revenues now comes from batteries, not only from the mining and the refining of materials. And this is a strategic move that takes place at the center of the mining industry for batteries. But also the so-called new entrants in the mining industry. GEM is specialized first in the recycling and it recycles most of the cobalt. Now you have much more recycled cobalt in China than first-hand cobalt in the batteries. And GEM now is trying also to develop the batteries and to go down, especially some specific specifications we can talk during this discussion. And two other firms also, Tsingshan and Hainan, have a similar strategy, let's say. So you see that also the mining firms now are trying to reconsider their positions into this supply chain, which is a thing we haven't seen in the combustion engine era, let's say. Some tried, but they were still kept out of the production manufacturing of engines or powertrains. But here something is happening that might keep our, at least we should keep our attention on that. And the third main evolution is those new oil chemistries, LFP, impact the market architecture and production for CATL and BYD, but also not so core LIB makers, Volt, Gaussian. They engage in new technologies quickly. Of course, this battery blade from BYD is seen now as the most performant battery in perhaps in China, especially because thanks to that, they do not need to have models. So you have the pack to battery thing, which helps a lot to have better cost, but also better efficiencies. But one point is the thermal conditions. So you need good new technologies in order to keep thermal conditions of the batteries, and especially LFP, they had some problems, especially in cold, during the winters, in cold conditions, they are not so efficient. So that is one issue. Then the cathode makers, they have at least two main now possibilities of moving into this supply chain. An upstream specialization like Spring and CNGR, trying also now to have some joint ventures with mining firms and so on, but also others niche specialization, current, Fengruan, Reshin, Review. Now, especially, I don't have an exact example about what is happening about those firms exactly, because I've lost a bit it's a bit late and it's already Friday. Anyway, they try now to find their own space rather than to expand their core competencies. I think we should also talk about that perhaps in the future. And the third point, usually we thought a lot that cathode are very important, especially regarding the cost of a battery. But the anode makers now face, especially the move to the LFP batteries, they need to have better anode materials, especially silicon materials. And in China, there are 5 main makers. Among them, BTR is specialized in those silicon anode. But BTR now faces a strong international competition, especially in Korean lib makers, the 3 main lib makers try to vertically integrate those new silicon anode things. 1 minute. Yes. Okay. And to finish with this discussion, the LFP growth patterns. Now LFP is on the road to be the mainstream battery chemistry. You can see also that BYD, CATL have a strong position, Great Power, which is another one, while because only Chinese makers are licensed LFP battery makers. That is also very important in this new segment. But also because the LFP batteries, they have another very great advantage, like Great Power shows. You can apply that to different, not only to EVs, but also to power bank, jump starter batteries, solar and wind and housing storage batteries, and other things. So perhaps you can have a development of those batteries in other sectors. Okay, thank you very much. I think it's time for me to stop here so that we have enough time for the discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much to all presenters. May I suggest, since we are running out of time, that we move straight into the discussion and avoid the break, if you don't mind. We have Professor Bruno Jetin that will introduce the discussion, then we will open the floor after giving an opportunity to the speakers to respond to his comments. May I also ask whoever wants to intervene to keep questions and comments short, trying to stick to 1 question, not to 5 every time, so that we give a chance to everybody to intervene. Thank you very much. Bruno, please.
Okay, thank you, Lorenza. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening to all of you. I will try to be as brief as possible because I suppose that many of you want to ask a lot of questions to the speakers who made very interesting and informative presentations. I would like to start by saying that we are witnessing a historical change of the automobile industry. what the specialists of the economics of innovation would call a paradigmatic moment, a change of technological paradigm. And this will change, I believe, the whole automobile industry, with new players having more importance than in the past. We have seen some of them in the presentation. It was the same when the internal combustion engine started to dominate other engines and technologies at the birth of the automobile industry at the end of the 19th and the start of the 20th century. At that time, there was a huge battle between the different players and in particular the suppliers of energy. The difference with the moment that we are living now is that at the start of the automobile industry, there was no mass producing automobile manufacturers, and now we are right in the middle of a well-established automobile industry with large automobile manufacturers, car makers, producing hundreds of thousands of units per year. And this already established mass-producing industry has to give birth to a new mass-producing automobile industry, this one based on the electric batteries. And I don't know many examples of industries which have lived such a dramatic change in the middle of their existence. So that will be probably a long transition from the internal combustion engine to the electric battery vehicle. That will take decades. And we will probably see setbacks and not only progress, depending on a whole set of macroeconomic and political and geostrategic conditions that will change many things. And let's not forget also technical change. So that I think that's important to remind this, I would say, circumstances to understand better what is going on in China. We are in the middle of a battle among different actors within China. We have seen those who are at the upstream of the value chain, the mining companies, those who are in the middle, I will make it short, those who are producing the cells and the battery packs, and those who are more downstream, the car makers, and finally, the companies which are recycling the batteries. And we should add also the companies which are producing electricity, let's not forget them. And finally, as always, for the automobile industry, one big actor that has not been mentioned tonight, and I was a bit surprised, is the government itself, which sets the rules, who is allowed to do what, who will be subsidized and for what reasons, and to also for a certain period of time. And in China, I think that the industrial policy, the role of the central governments and the local authorities has been very important to shape the automobile industry as it is now, and also for the electric vehicle industry, which is developing very fast. So what I would like to ask to the presenters is precisely this kind of questions that relates to this historical moment that we are experiencing now. There is, as I said, a battle among different actors within the value chain. And I would like to ask you, according to the knowledge that you have accumulated, who do you think will win this war? Do you think that the upstream companies, the mining industries have any chance to dominate the value chain, to really become cell manufacturers, battery assemblers, and even enter the car making itself? Or do you think that it is just a period of trial and error, and these companies will go back to their core activities, which is mining and not producing batteries? Do you think that the battery makers themselves and all the actors which are concurring to produce cells and then battery packs that are trying now to go upstream or downstream, do you think that they will be successful? What is specific to the battery making that makes possible these companies to be successful outside of their core competencies? If we compare to the previous automobile industry, we have never seen these actors, the equivalent, able to either go upstream or downstream for a long period of time and being successful. In this sense, there are companies which produce internal combustion engine, which are much more, I would say, efficient than the one that are used and conceived by car makers, but they were never able to become car makers themselves. So what would make it different from the electric car? What are the reasons that, according to you, could make these battery makers calling the shots and deciding what kind of cars would be produced by car makers, or having the capacity to become car makers themselves? So these are the questions I have in mind. Do you think, for example, that BYD, which to my knowledge is the only company which has an integrated strategy to be everywhere in all the segments of the value chain, do you think that this strategy will be successful, that thanks to this strategy, BYD will tend to dominate the Chinese market? Or will BYD will have to reduce its presence to refocus on, for instance, just producing batteries and cars, which would be a lot because it would be two important segments of the value chain? What do you think that these actors will do after, I would say, attempts to be successful outside of their core competencies? They won't be all successful. There will be winners and losers. So who do you think will win and lose in this battle among different actors? Another question I have to you is regarding the financing of this huge investments, not only in their area of origin, but also outside of their comfort zone. Who is financing all these huge investments? Who are the stakeholders, the shareholders? Is it only financed with internal funds, the accumulated profits from the first stage of the battery and electric car industry? Or are these investments financed by banks, which is usually the case in China? Banks and internal funds are the main sources of investments. I think that these profit strategies, if they are in China, need to be elucidated so that we know better if this moment that we are living and this attempt to invest all along the segments of the value chain is a sustainable strategy, or if in 1 or 2 years or 3 years from now, there will be someone holding managing the finance who will tell the managers, hold on, we are losing so much money that we have to change our strategy and make sure that we don't lose everything. I'm reminding this because we don't know what are the losses or the profits that these companies are making. I know that in China, the necessity to make a maximum of short profit is not as binding as in Europe or in the USA, where companies are usually public and have to reward their shareholders with an increase of the price of the stocks or by sharing a lot of dividends. In China, this is not so much a constraint for now, but one day it will become also an important element of the strategy of the company. So this is, I think, an important question to understand what will be the consolidation of the battery production in China and the whole electric value chain. And to finish with, I would like to ask you again, what do you think will be the strategy of the Chinese government in the near future? The government has already changed many times its policy and the subsidies given to the companies. They have now focused more on the technological capabilities of the actors. They want the batteries to have a higher range than they have so far. The LFP may be more stable and cheaper, but it does not have a long range. So maybe it is for the moment the preferred battery in China, but I don't believe that it will be the case on the long term. There will be other chemistries that will be much more efficient. So that calls, you know, the question of the importance of innovation and the role played by the Chinese government to try to guide this innovation and make sure that the Chinese producers all along the value chain become profitable, efficient, and leading the technological progress. And the final question will be if the solid-state batteries really becomes available in 2025 or in 2030s. Do you think that the Chinese battery makers will be the leaders of this new technology? Do you think that they will be the first one to be able to deliver these batteries, or other foreign competitors will be the first one to mass produce these batteries to the car makers, and that the Chinese battery industry may become obsolete or stuck to old technologies such as the LFP and not able to compete with the most, I would say, modern and efficient batteries. This is a question mark because we know that all battery makers and car makers are engaged in this technological race. And we don't know really what is the capacity of the Chinese companies. Are they efficient followers of technologies developed by Korean or Japanese, or maybe in the future European companies, or are they at the forefront of the technological innovation? And will the Chinese company be the one that will promote the next generation of batteries? I know that it's a lot of questions, but I think that these questions needs to be put on the table to understand what is the dynamic of this consolidation process that we are witnessing in China these days. Thank you very much, and sorry for being longer than I expected.
Doris. Thank you very much, Bruno. Thank you for raising all these questions that undoubtedly show the complexity of the discussion. Some of these are very broad questions and regard the future. So I would say, for the sake of time, that the speakers can also feel free to select what they want to focus on or to share the focus. So I will give a chance to both Xieshu and ZHAO to answer first, and then to Stéphane in the order you prefer. The Xieshu and ZHAO, you decide. And then we will open the floor.
Okay, I will maybe start. Yeah, I totally agree. There are a lot of questions and very well thought to look into these different aspects. So from all the interesting questions that Bruno has raised, I think first, yes, the government has been a key role, especially if we look at the case of China, and if we say that Europe is for the moment catching up regarding the battery industry in China. So if we look at the evolution of the EV and battery policy in China, we have seen that there is gradually opening up on the side of how to say market entry, but there is at the same time how to say a tightening up of technical requirements in order to access to financial advantages in China. This actually resulted in what we have seen, also mentioned by Stéphane, the coming back of the LFP, which actually, due to its lower energy intensity, is not often how to say sufficient to obtain the financial subsidy of the government. So it's up to the car company and its battery supplier to decide whether it wants to go into the subsidy aspect or it wants to go into market orientation, as we see in the very successful models of Wuling Hongguang. So actually, I think the market is evolving very fast because of the policy changement. And also, if we look at what the government has been doing in China recently, is also incubating this credit market. So imposing EV credit for OEMs and also for car makers, and also sanction their pollution degree of the car sales. So this will push car makers to going into better solutions, not only for financial aspects, but also for the greening of the vehicles in the future, because China is very engaged for the carbon neutrality before 2016, and also we are doing a lot of we have seen a lot of changes recently under this concept of ecological civilization in China. So that is what I think we can look, we can say about the policy side. About the battery technology side, I'm not an expert. I know that solid battery is now being chased after several leaders. Also, CATL is working very actively on the solid state battery. In China, as we have also said in our presentation, a lot of leaders have been doing is the technology innovation regarding the pack in order to increase the safety and to reduce costs, but more fundamental innovation regarding technology, fundamental technologies of the cells, it's still underway, but China is, I think, going along with Japanese leaders on the solid state battery, because also there are some national R&D programs in China together with universities and research institutes and also corporate side in order to not lose the trend. Yeah, I think I will stop here and I will give the floor to other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Xieshu.
Thank you, Bruno.
Well, very quick points to supplement Xieshu's point is that in terms of technological innovation, if you observe the tradition or the behavior of Chinese firms, they are very good technology or innovation followers. They are not first movers. So if you have a new technology, I think that's they keep an eye on the solid state battery. All of them they know that, but they are waiting for the real paradigm which falls, and then they will scale up the manufacturing. So I think that's they see that they will win the second round, not the first round, which is really technological breakthrough they are waiting. In terms of innovation, if you check the cell to pack technology or the blade battery, they're just architectural or product architectural design. They are not the cell component innovation in terms of technology. So they just designed a new form, a new structure of the product, not of the pack, and not the cell itself. And thank you also, Bruno, for your excellent question about who will win the EV market or the EV industry. I thought overall it. I read your article, excellent article about this. And I give you my personal comment on that, maybe my try of answering. I think that the situation in the long term will be that the Chinese firms, battery firms, or the EV OEMs, they will go back to their core competencies to compete, because they, as I said 1,000 times, chemistry, battery, and the car assembly, these are two sectors, in fact. And for Chinese government, it's a emerging it's called strategic emerging industry. So it is regarded and taken as a separate sector to be developed. You have a complete value chain. It's just you have a crossroad somewhere that you meet. That's the EV. Which is a big utilizer, a client of that. So if really that, I think that's a structure in the future would be very much like what we observe today in the cell phone or smart phone or the laptop industry. You have modularized producers for their big parts, packs, etc. And then you have a system integrator. On the other side, you have digital firms, service, and their network. They develop the software, artificial intelligence systems, etc. And then maybe that's in the middle that you have the automobile, traditional previous automobile makers. They transform themselves into systemic integrator in the whole picture. But I think that if really that we talk about the winner in the future, I believe if some companies, the more that you have your core competencies, the more probable that you can become the winner. That means what? Check the point of the cases of BYD or Tesla. I think if these companies, they began, let's say BYD, its core competence, original core competence is really in battery manufacturing, especially the battery which is not the LFP but the MC battery. That was their real development point. And then they were the first mover in China in EV market. They jump into the EV market. They develop progressively another core competence, which is car making, by learning from Daimler, etc. And then so if you check, they now have double competencies, what I call double. One is in battery sector, the other is in the OEM assembly. So the more in the future, I think that you have firms like that, they have more competencies in different fields. the more probable this will become the winner. So Tesla, BYD, yes, they still have their future. That's my trying of answering. Thank you.
Thank you, ZHAO.
Well, thank you, Bruno. I think you're right, pointing out several very pressing questions. Of course, one that we haven't talked about is the profit, whether they can make profit on that or not. And in fact, so far, of course, CATL is a profit maker, okay? And I think these profits can easily re-inject into new evolutions, new joint ventures, acquiring mines, and so on. That is a model that is the one followed by CATL. But we see that every time there is a trial to acquire a new mine or something, you can see other players coming on. So now you have a strong, let's say, concurrence regarding how to attract joint venture new players. That is one thing. The second point we haven't talked here, because we studied or we talked about China, we haven't talked about South Korean, LG Chem, and the two others. And they are now strongly, I think they are really well advanced in different battery chemistries, compared perhaps even to BYD, as ZHAO pointed out. When you look at the BYD blade, it's just the cell form. The chemistry hasn't changed much. So, of course, there is not much evolution in that. While when you look at the Korean side, you see that they are vertically integrating the anode maker, cathode maker, electrolyte maker, separator maker, and giving a straightforward direction of what to develop, especially when we look at the cost. You talked about electricity, just for instance, for the anode, which is not the biggest part of the cost of a battery, but at least now it will be quite expensive in the coming years, especially if you want to move to using silicon, so which will be made very often from now on. And to process that, you use, I don't remember really well, but I think it's a huge amount of electricity just to one process to produce the graphite and so on. So a huge amount of electricity, it costs a lot. And this part of cost reduction is quite now a trouble for China, I guess. And you've all heard that energy cuts and so on, they had to now close the factories for some days and so on, and other things. And the government especially pointed out that one move that had made the government, I think, in its policies, it was in 2019 and 2019 from my point of view. It was when we moved the subsidies from the final consumers to the industry. And then if we look at the industry, we do not only look at the batteries, the efficiency of the batteries, whether their emissions are reduced or not, but also the manufacturing process, okay? And they have very pointed out that if you want an NCM batteries, if you want LFP batteries, and so on, what are the costs regarding production, electricity, and so on. And here the directives, well, there are no incentives to change that, but at least perhaps here in the government might make some efforts perhaps in the future so that those small, at least manufacturers of cathode anode separators might be more efficient, energy efficient, and so on, and also from the point of view of cost. While if I look at the Korean side, I see no strong policy from the government. I see rather strong policies from the first-year suppliers. So that's one point. The second point is regarding whether they will move to the core competencies or diversify. Well, those who will win depends on another factor. As I try to point out, we see always the curves. We see a lot of gigawatts now, more than 50 gigawatts. Perhaps CATL can make 100 gigawatts in 3 years and so on. But what does it mean concretely in terms of production output of cars? It's what I wanted to point out also, is that if you have 54 gigawatts, you can produce 1 million cars, okay? So if you can move to 100, perhaps with better production processes, then you can move to 2-3 million cars produced from one battery maker like CATL, with one among the 3 biggest in the world now, yeah? Well, regarding that, it means that if you want to mass produce those cars, you still need to inject more and more money into this industry. And so I still don't agree on when you talked about now we have a big change in already a mass production industry. Well, it's still not a mass production subsegment. And if you want to mass produce EVs, well, there is still a second step forward, yeah, to take. And the second point I would like to talk about core competencies also is, well, the batteries can be used in different other things, but battery electricity storage and all those other things. And we see that more and more, some, not the battery makers, but at least what I would call the second tier, those who had like somewhat integrated or diversified a bit their production. Now they are not oriented toward EVs, but also they try also to diversify to other sectors, not only the automotive industry. And perhaps that might be also a way to escape the trap if in the end there is not such a huge market, final market or final demand of EVs in China. And that's why I think also here I would like, I agree with ZHAO. Well, on the one hand, they will focus on their core competencies, but on the other hand, well, they are not first movers, as you told. When we look at the cathode, the Japanese cathode makers were really strong at the very beginning, yeah, and they just replicated, let's say, and they caught up with the Japanese makers. So I'm not sure most of the Chinese firms are eager to reconcentrate on their core competencies. Perhaps they will see more market development in order to find profits. Well, those are a few points, and I see it's time perhaps to open the floor to the other participants.
Okay, thank you very much. We have about 20 minutes left for discussion. I suggest to use about 10 minutes to collect some questions from the audience, and then to leave other 10 minutes to the speakers to give a final response. I don't know if anybody wants to start. I imagine then Tommaso will also have some points. I also have some questions. Please.
I will start. I will try to be brief. What is fascinating here is that we have already a huge industry, but the market is going to grow enormously. So on one hand, you have an industry which is a structured one, but we know that since the electrification is coming, I look at that in particular in Europe, but in China is the same story, and we know that it's going to come in fast. That means that the market structure can still evolve. And my question, the feeling in Europe is that you have announcement of new gigafactories, a new producer every day, more or less. And it's that it seems like everybody can enter into this industry and start to produce batteries, which I think is not true. When we look at China, we see that there's one player which is very big, which is CATL, then there's BYD behind, but then there are a lot of smaller players. So my question is there an advantage of being a first mover and the fact that the Chinese battery makers have already in advance on the European that are coming or North American ones? Do they have a competitive advantage, and how do you qualify this advantage? Is that a matter of controlling the raw materials, the availability of raw materials, the price? It is a matter of volume, and so when we are talking about economy of scales, what does it mean? I mean, is there a limit to the economy of scale, or is it a real big barrier to entry? It is a matter of quality. We know that batteries must be very performant, and you cannot afford to have a quality problem so the car burns or explodes. So is the quality also a factor? Is variety a factor? The fact of producing different type of batteries for different type of usage is something that is playing a role. Innovation, I mean, is they have more advanced products or new combination of materials? The chances of getting to solid state is related to the fact of being big, or it is not a factor? I mean, how much money do they put in R&D, or more than others or not? So I'm multiplying the dimensions, but what is the advantage of these first movers? Do they have really a lot of chances to be there? The big ones will have an advantage, or due to the growth of the market, things might change in the future? And I have other questions, but I'll leave it here for the moment. The competition will be defined by what? Right? It is the price that will define who are the most competitive battery makers. The lowest the price, the biggest the market, the biggest the volume, or are other dimensions to the competitive game? And again, the competitive advantage. CATL is the stronger because it can sell the cheapest batteries with the best quality performance, or other factors will play into that. And thank you very much for both presentation. And I would just want to say that before the conclusion, I would like to ask you, the three of you, a last question, this really last question about what are the key research questions that we look at collectively? I mean, if we start to think about a collective project about the battery industry, beyond what you do, what you will see as the main areas of research that we should be looked at in the future, and we should document in terms of empirical analysis or theoretical inquiries. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommaso. Undoubtedly, this will be a continuing conversation that will be crucial for GRPSA in the months and years to come. I will just abuse my position to ask my question, and then perhaps if someone wants, please raise your hand. So I was very impressed by the scope of the industrial consolidation process that you described, shifting from 240 battery makers in 2015 to 50 in 2020. This is massive. So my question here would be, one is, if you had to give a final assessment of the process, looking at these few years, to what extent this was a matter of spontaneous competition and firms that didn't make it, or to what extent this was driven, if you had to conclude on this, because we mentioned many points, but to give a final assessment. And the other thing, can we expand a bit and turn this focus, rather than to success factors, to who lost? Can you tell us a bit more about who was left out and why, and how what happened? What was the impact, for example? Like, did these firms diversify? Did they close? Were there closures? What was the employment impact, for example? Because this is a downsizing process of the consolidation. Let's call it consolidation, but that was massive. So can you tell us a bit more about who lost? Those who lost. Thank you. Anybody else? Or the speakers want to respond to these other questions? Okay, 3 seconds for other questions. Otherwise, I will give you the chance to respond. Okay, there is Marc Calochet. And then after this, as I had promised 10 minutes to respond, we will give it back to the speakers. Mark, please go on.
Yes. So first of all, thank you very much for your very interesting, both Very interesting presentation, both of them. But there is one key factor, in fact, for the success of battery, which has not been really addressed in both presentations, which is the battery management system. And in fact, my question is, who is going to win? Are battery cells maker going to win, or battery management system designer going to win? And if BMS designer are going to win, which could be one answer, in this situation, automakers are going back in the game, because most of automakers nowadays are designing BMS by themselves.
Okay, thank you very much. You have exactly 10 minutes to share between the three of you. So please, in the order you prefer.
Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you all for the very interesting questions and very challenging questions, I will say also. Yes, the question Thomas raised about is, it's very difficult to answer because I think all the aspects count. That's why companies are doing at the same time mass production, so capacity expansion. At the same time, they work on improve the quality of the batteries they already produce. And they continue to innovate, to follow the technology trend in order to not lose in the coming competition. This actually goes back to the question of financial sustainability of a company, I think. I think in the case of China, yes, we already talked about during the answer to Bruno, that Chinese company probably they have longer time period in order to develop their strategy because they don't have this short-term pressure from shareholders on the stock market. And also because we know that they are also bonds that company issued that are purchased by banks in China, which are more, how to say, which can also supply a lot of capital for companies to make their strategic moves. So instead, as we also see, if we also look at the traditional OEMs, a lot of OEM have been changed from hands to hands, their owners because of financial problems. For example, Ford has sold a lot of brands because they met financial pressure from the stock market, from their manager, which is so it's a pure capital and profits based how to say drive. In the case of China, so it's quite different, but nevertheless, we know that in China also the financial pressure is increasing with the debts, government debts, banking debts, and also these are pushing more severe selections of investment and also giving much trouble for companies to increase their business lines. I don't know if I quite answer well the question of Thomas, but I think this also lead to the question of Lorenza. Which are the losers? Where do they go? A lot of losers in China in the sector of battery, just because they had made too long business lives. If they go investing into the mines, but they could not deliver the products in time, or due to other questions, they just cannot sustain their financial credits. They have to or sell or a part of their business, or they have to go bankruptcy. We have seen a lot of companies in recent years that, and also even some of the leaders, for example, I recently read, I think it is Ferrazzi, which is bought by Wang, which is originated a US company, is also facing financial pressure. So, the market is constantly changing, and due to this price, quality, and innovation triangle, we can also say that Then about the question raised, Mark, about if it's the BMS designers that control the market, then the market will go back to the hands of the automakers. It's true that a lot of BMS is done in-house. So the automaker control their the final, we can say the final format and the installation of the batteries. But still they lack the chemistry expertise, as also said Stéphane. Maybe they don't have also all this special expertise to go into the managed control of battery production. And also there is needed a lot of investment for battery production. So BMS will maybe continue to be part supplied by battery cell makers and part in-house. And I'm not sure that if there will be a clear future for the OEM to control this part. Okay, thank you for my intervention.
Thank you. Very quickly, I just want to answer two questions of Tommaso. One is, what is the advantage of Chinese auto EV battery makers? My point is that their advantage is based on their core competency. This core competency, you have two things. At the firm level, it is a core competency of mass production of the quality products, packs, if you want. And this core competency is due to their appropriate technological learning approach, which we don't have time to develop today. Secondly, based on their very concrete low-level, how to say, the manufacturing ecosystem pumped up by the clusters. You have these firms, they are located in specific geographic industrial clusters. At another level, in terms of China, you have the complete battery industry right now. So this is for the country that you don't have other economy in the world who has such a complete and customized and oriented towards the OEMs. So it's a big supplier, the biggest supplier for this. Second, for your question about the question that I would like to raise for Shapisa, etc., for all of us to think. I have two questions in my mind. I have no answer. One is that what will be the future would be look like the previous automobile industry. I cannot see that maybe value chain is not a good framework or term to describe. Maybe that we are approaching a kind of value chain, not value chain, but value network. And you have different, the cross of different sectors, which together make a kind of so-called, if you call that automobile, but it's very, how to say, dispersed. And the second question is that if it's like that, what will be the role, respectively, to the three poles of battery making areas? One is China, East Asia, not only China, but you also have Japan and South Korea. Secondly, you have Europe. And thirdly, you have North America, United States. And what will be the role of these three poles in the future in the global battery supply chain? And that is, I cannot see very clearly that from the moment. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your questions. There are plenty of questions raised here. I think one is about Tommaso. What is the model, the approach, the scale approach, economies of scale, the price, the quality, innovation? How can you qualify the competition right now? Well, I fully agree with Xieshu. Here we have, now it's a period of time where, well, you must to meet quality requirements, okay? The Chevy Volts and the LG Chem had a lot of problems recently, okay? Recall of fire burning and so on. So if you don't meet these quality requirements and all these chemistry things, well, it's very well advanced and it's moving. It's already evolving right now. So from the innovative side, I think even if China is not, no, China is quite now well advanced in very different sectors. So they have a strong advantage, and I think they won't use that because to require this qualification is not so easy. Well, the second thing is we see now in US, especially some specific makers coming out with very specific technologies. So I see, from my point of view, Western Europe a bit out of the future, because there are very small firms now attracted by that, and they have innovative capabilities. They can bring in, I don't remember which firm, I think it was Eve, who invested with an American firm, one of the main lib maker, invested there. And two other examples don't come out. But anyway, that is one thing. The other thing is, of course, the cost. We already talked about the 100 euros for kilowatt per hour thing. If we go down to that, well, for the final consumer, well, it's equivalent to internal combustion engine. Okay, that was what we heard for several years. Now we are reaching that point, and for some chemistries, we are below that point, okay? And we see Svold is developing that. Caution perhaps is the most advanced in the cost competition now. Some say right now the most competitive and perhaps with better qualities, better requirements is the BYD battery blade. Well, but we see other new batteries coming out from China. I don't see that neither in Japan nor in Korea. ESSCA Innovation, I talked about them. Now they are reorganizing themselves, but I don't see coming on there. So I think also from a price point of view, China has still an advantage. As for the economies of scale, still we cannot talk about that, I think, because I don't see, or still I haven't regarded that. I haven't well checked that point, economies of scale, whether it makes sense for the battery makers. I would like to look at that clearly in the future, whether it's economies of scale that would make the difference or not. So I think this quality innovation thing is still very important right now. Regarding Mark's question, we didn't talk about BMS. Well, I'm quite confused about the BMS story, because the BMS story in China, as far as I understood now, most of the battery makers, BYD, CATL, and others, Great Power, Sunwoda, and others, have their own BMS made in-house. Okay, so which means that I fully agree that if the BMS knowledge flows out, then it comes back in the hands of the manufacturer, the car makers. I fully agree with that, but in China, it seems that the core battery makers now they have both knowledge in the chemistry and also the software part to manage that. So I think I don't see whether there is a chance for the car makers to jump into this competition. And so far, even in China, you've seen the development of which one? SAIC has its development. Other car makers also try to do that. I think Geely is trying also to have more in-house batteries thing, but they will still lack a lot of competencies, because even the BMS is still in the hands of the battery makers. But I need that might be a question in the future we might raise also. And now, what might be the question I would like to raise for the future research in Japan? I thought throughout the Q&A sessions, we had all the questions on the table. First, now, so far in the auto industry, we thought as a tier in the industry, okay? First tier OEM, first tier, second tier, third tier, and so on. Something new now, we have to see that there are different chemistries, so perhaps we will see a different segmentation, so different tiers following chemistries. My question here is, in the future, can we see a segmentation into this industry regarding the chemistries, and whether there is this specialized makers in some chemistries for specific vehicles, and then we'll see ZHAO told us supply chain doesn't make much sense so far in this industry. Perhaps you can see segmented supply chains based on that. So that is one question I think we need to look at very precisely, whether the chemistries might make a big difference in the segmentation in the future. The second question also is, well, Bruno talked about that, the mining corporation, the mining firms, what will be their role in the future? Well, they have the knowledge about also those players. We do not talk much about them when we talk about the batteries. But it seems that they are making very strong strategic moves right now. And perhaps they can move downstream the industry quite in a short future by acquiring some parts of the industries, by acquiring other firms, and then develop their own batteries. I think the second point would be for us also to look a bit now at not only at what we call the top of the supply chain, as we did in the automotive industry, but also look at what is going on now from this side. And the third question, of course, is the government policies. Okay, European Union now has raised really strong, or has a strong policy, perhaps driven by the German makers. Okay, perhaps Tommaso wants to talk about that, but that's another question. We see in US also now quite involved in that. We see China following that. We see Japan more cautious also because they see that Japanese car makers are not, they are very cautious about the development of EVs, so they prefer to keep their energies in following in the second round, let's say. I think the Japanese car makers now are looking at that. Well, Honda announced that in 2030 all sales will be EVs, but that's another thing. Well, but the third thing is the roles of governments, but and especially in organizing those clusters. Here, I think ZHAO pointed out that in China, the clustering is very strong compared to other countries, compared to even South Korea and Japan. If we look only at East Asia, what I'm looking right now in, I don't know what's going on in Europe, in US, but this clustering and how the local government especially can not only look at the incentives, but also try to orient the industry. This is very important in China, from my point of view. And I think for us in the future, we should also look at that, what is going on in North America and in Europe regarding this possibility of clustering different firms and different segments, and not only from the car makers, in order to work together. So, well, I think this is all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that Xieshu wants to have a quick follow-up, but then we will close straight after this. Thanks for staying a bit longer, please.
Lorenza, yeah, I forgot, I jumped the question about future research questions. I think two questions that I'm very interested to look into is, firstly, under the picture of climate change, of government's engagement for carbon neutralization. And also we have seen that a lot of OEMs have announced their own ICE phase out dates. So I think there is a general trend of also accelerating electrification, but also imposing more and more carbon print pressure on the battery firms, I think. And also not only battery firms themselves, but also their suppliers, the mining companies, the material producers. And this will also, out of doubt, accelerate the part of circular economy of recyclers part of the battery firm. I think this big picture and this general moves could be interesting to look into and to understand whether OEMs will be a leading part because they impose life cycle assessment, they impose a lot of standard due to their position in the market, or the battery firms will be more strong because they have the technology advantages and expertise, or there could be pressure from the government because they impose certain changements to satisfy the carbon emission reduction. So I think this could be a research aspect, whether there is clear or not one question, or there could be several questions. Another point I'm just thinking about is China and Europe. As we have already discussed among us, that Chinese firms are strong for the moment, but Europe, backed by the Green Deal, and also by we have seen governments also moving to support their own battery producers in France, in UK, and in different leading European countries. And also we have seen a lot of alliances of battery production. So whether China and Europe will be more competitors or will be collaborators on this future development, and also what are the roles of Chinese companies investing in Europe, whether EV companies or battery companies, will there be an accelerator for the European development, or there will be a challenge, or they will risk to be chasing out in the future because the local governments want to build their own manufacturing capacity. So this is the second question I think might be interesting to look into. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but this team will still be central within GERPISA, as we said. We are planning other events. There could be other proposals for joint publications, etc. I invite the audience also to get in touch with the speakers later on if you want. I just want to give you the next appointments, as you might have received, like you will have seen the communication that finally we managed to restart our seminars in French in person. So they are happening physically in Paris as long as we can. And so the next one will be on the 3rd of December and will be on the energy transition and the reindustrialization in France. On the 3rd of December, then the international seminars, so those in English will continue to be online to allow for participation from any side of the globe. And the next one we will have will be on the political economy of emission standards on the 17th of December. Yes, thank you, Sebastian. We'll also share the details in the chat, but you find all this information on our website. I thank you all very much again, the speakers, Bruno, for discussing these two very interesting presentations and all those who contributed. See you at the next online seminar. If you are in Paris, enjoy the possibility to physically attend the next one. Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, Lorenza. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks also to the little one who participated with patience.
Yes, it gives some life.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good day. See you soon.